Have you ever faced a choice where every option could change your life forever? In this story, Quang, a talented entrepreneur crushed by failure, seeks help from a powerful and calculating CEO. The CEO offers to invest in Quang's new project, promising a chance to rebuild his career. But with a chilling condition: Quang must marry the CEO's daughter. Refusing means starting over from the bottom with no support at all. Caught between ambition and personal freedom, Quang struggles to decide. Stay with us as we unravel his journey of temptation, morality, and life-altering decisions. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the full story. The CEO Quang sought out for help was no ordinary man. He was a legend in the business world, the kind of figure whose mere nod could change a person's destiny overnight. Years of power and success had sculpted his presence into something both commanding and unsettling. His office, perched high above the city, exuded quiet authority, walls lined with art that whispered of wealth, a faint scent of aged wood and ambition hanging in the air. When Quang stepped into that space, he carried with him the weight of failure and the fragile hope of redemption. He had lost nearly everything: his company, his partners, his confidence. Yet in his eyes still burned that restless spark of someone who refused to be defeated. As Quang laid out his proposal, his voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly under the polished mahogany table. He spoke of innovation, of rebuilding, of lessons learned through downfall. The CEO listened without interruption, his fingers steepled, his gaze sharp enough to pierce through the most carefully chosen words. When Quang finished, the silence stretched, heavy, assessing. Then the man leaned back in his chair, a faint smile curling at the corner of his lips, the kind of smile that made it impossible to tell whether he was impressed or amused. "I see potential," the CEO finally said, his tone deliberate, his words measured like chess moves. "You've fallen, but that can be useful. People who've tasted failure are often the ones who succeed the second time, if they learn to obey the rules of power." Quang looked up, unsure where the conversation was leading, but the older man's next words caught him completely off guard. "I will invest in your project. I will help you rebuild your empire, but I have one condition." He paused, letting the suspense sink in before he added, "I want you to become my son-in-law." The words struck Quang like a thunderclap. For a heartbeat, he thought he had misheard, but the CEO's gaze didn't waver. There was no trace of jest. The offer was real, as was the trap hidden beneath it. The man's fortune, his influence, and the chance for Quang to rise again were all laid before him, tied with a single thread of marriage and allegiance. It wasn't just a deal. It was a test of submission, of loyalty, of how much one was willing to trade for success. Quang's throat tightened. He had come seeking a partner, but what he found was a bargain with destiny itself, and a question that would haunt him long after he left that gleaming office. How much of himself was he willing to sell to stand tall again? Quang sat frozen in his seat, the echo of the CEO's words still reverberating in his mind. The air in the office suddenly felt heavier, denser, as though it carried the weight of a decision far greater than business. His mind scrambled to make sense of what had just been said. Marry his daughter? The thought felt surreal, absurd even. Yet the cold gleam in the older man's eyes made it clear that this was no jest. The CEO leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm, like a judge delivering a sentence. "You have ambition, Quang. I can see that. But ambition alone doesn't buy trust. I need assurance, a bond deeper than contracts or signatures. My daughter is that bond." The way he said it sent a chill down Quang's spine. There was no emotion in his tone, no fatherly warmth or concern for his daughter's happiness, only calculation, precision, and control. It was as if she were merely another asset in his empire, a piece in the grand game he played so effortlessly. Quang tried to keep his composure, forcing a polite smile, but his heart was pounding violently against his ribs. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. The CEO didn't even blink. "Then I'm afraid I can't justify the risk of investing in you. I might, however, have a position open. Entry level, of course. You'd have a chance to work, to earn, maybe even rebuild your confidence. But your project..." He let the words trail off, his gaze shifting toward the city skyline beyond the glass wall. "Your project will die before it ever breathes." That was the moment Quang realized the magnitude of the trap he had walked into. Every road out seemed blocked. On one side, the humiliation of accepting a hollow position, starting from the bottom again, losing everything he dreamed of. On the other, the moral and emotional compromise of tying his life to a stranger for the sake of ambition. It was a cruel kind of power play, one that forced him to weigh his pride against his future. The CEO had spoken with such composure that it almost sounded reasonable, even generous. But Quang knew better. This wasn't a partnership, it was possession. He stared down at his hands, his mind caught between reason and desperation. The silence in the room stretched on, broken only by the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Finally, he looked up, meeting the CEO's gaze. "I need time," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The older man regarded him with a knowing smirk, as though he had expected that answer all along. "Of course," he said, rising from his chair, "but don't take too long, Quang. Opportunities fade faster than courage." As Quang left the office, the doors closing behind him with a quiet hiss, he felt the weight of the decision pressing down on his chest. Outside, the city lights flickered like restless stars, bright, alluring, and distant. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that whatever choice he made next would define not only his career, but the man he would become. Quang walked out of the towering glass building and into the cool night air. But the world outside felt strangely unreal, as if he were drifting in a dream where every choice carried the weight of a lifetime. The city hummed around him, distant car horns, the soft chatter of pedestrians, neon lights flickering like fragile promises. Yet none of it could penetrate the storm inside his mind. Each step he took felt measured, deliberate, as though walking too quickly would cause him to stumble under the gravity of the decision he now faced. On one hand lay the chance to rebuild everything he had lost, to resurrect his ambitions and prove to the world and to himself that failure was not the end. On the other, there was the bitter taste of submission, the uncomfortable thought of binding his life to someone else's plan, sacrificing personal freedom for opportunity. His mind raced with questions that had no easy answers. Could he accept the CEO's condition and still find a sense of integrity in his own life? Would marrying the daughter of a man like that turn him into a mere pawn in a game of wealth and influence? Or could he navigate it with cunning and rise stronger than ever? He imagined the life he could have if the investment went through, his project alive, employees believing in him again, the city's skyline bending to his ambition. Yet, alongside that vision, the image of being trapped in a role he hadn't chosen for love, but for leverage, lingered like a shadow he could not shake. Pride, principle, and longing for freedom collided violently in his chest, leaving him breathless. Quang stopped on a quiet street corner, the hum of distant traffic a faint murmur beneath his racing thoughts. He leaned against the lamppost, staring at his own reflection in a puddle that shimmered in the yellow light. He saw a man at a crossroads, caught between desire and conscience, ambition and self-respect. He remembered the long nights spent building ideas, the sacrifices made, the belief that his own hands could carve a path to success. And yet, the CEO's words echoed relentlessly. Opportunities fade faster than courage. The pressure of time, the urgency of survival threatened to pull him toward a decision he wasn't ready to make. Finally, Quang exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough for clarity to seep in. He knew he could not answer tonight. He needed hours, maybe days, to weigh the cost of compromise against the hunger for success. He needed to find where his boundaries lay, to understand how much of himself he was willing to risk, and how far he could bend without breaking. With a steadying breath, he pulled out his phone and typed a brief message, his fingers trembling slightly. Then he stopped, reading it over before sending it. A simple request for time, nothing more. It was an act of defiance and of prudence, a declaration that he would not be rushed into a decision that would define the rest of his life. As he pocketed the phone and looked up at the night sky, Quang felt a strange calm settle over him. The city around him was alive, indifferent yet brimming with possibility. And in that moment, suspended between fear and hope, he realized that the path forward would not be dictated by anyone but himself. The choice remained his, a delicate balance between power and principle, ambition and integrity. And for the first time in days, he felt the faint stirrings of clarity, the quiet certainty that, whatever he decided, it would be a choice made consciously, deliberately, and entirely his own.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Ninja Review. Vậy là trong tập phim của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc thì đã có những tình tiết rất là mới, đó chính là CEO người mà đã đồng ý giúp Quang và tài trợ tiền vào dự án mới của Quang. Đã ra một điều kiện là ông ta sẽ chỉ hỗ trợ tiền cho Quang nếu Quang đồng ý làm con rể của ông ta, lấy con gái của ông ta. Còn nếu Quang không đồng ý thì ông ta vẫn sẽ giúp Quang, nhưng không đầu tư vào dự án của anh mà sẽ chỉ cho anh làm nhân viên bình thường của công ty của ông ta mà thôi. Đứng trước lựa chọn như vậy thì Quang sẽ chọn sự nghiệp hay chọn Linda? Tất cả tình tiết hấp dẫn sẽ được kể ở các câu chuyện tiếp theo. Các bạn hãy bấm vào nút đăng ký kênh để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về tập phim sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh nha. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại vào tập sau. Bye bye.